All right. Good day, everyone, and um, I hope our day was good. Today we are going to be looking at responsive nav bar, just as requested by one of our participants. It was in the request of one of our participants that we make our um, headers nav responsive with just HTML and CSS. And today we'll be looking at that briefly. And I want to say that what we can use, but I want to just introduce us to some of the concepts we'll be using to achieve that. And one of that is CSS combinators, right? We cannot afford not to use CSS combinators. So we are going to be using them. I remember there was one of those, one of us, there was one of our section where I talked about CSS combinators, where I talk about um, um, the general sibling combinator, the direct child combinator, and the adjacent sibling combinator. So today we are going to be using some of those or the suitable one for whatever we want to do. So in this, I will just create just a header with nav elements and nav lists and show us how they can collapse into menu bar when we are on smaller screen. So for the purpose of this, for the purpose of today's section, or for the purpose of today's task, I would like to just um, work on header only, because what we are actually looking at is the navigation in header. So we'll begin as usual with a our what's it called, our boilerplate, and I will call this um res what is it responsive navigation, right? So that is going to be our header, right? Our title, I mean. So we are going to link our CSS as well and call it styles.css, which is what we have here empty. So we are going to come inside our body and create our header using the semantic header element. And inside of it, we are going to create the logo class for that is going to contain the logo, right? So we have this and we will just put h3, or let's say h2 of what, logo, right? Just like this. So we'll have our logo in there, and also inside the header we want to have our nav, and this our nav is going to contain a list. So and we want to use an unordered list, and so excuse me, you're going to have to list the items like this, like this, right? So inside the list, we want to have an anchor tag that takes us to a particular web page, and we want this to be called home, just as we have done in the other sections. And we want to copy this and have about, let's say, four is okay, and we are going to call this about, sorry, about, we are going to call this resources, sorry, resources, and we'll call the last one contacts, just like this. So we have our navigation, and this is what we are going to be working with. And also we want to have some things that allows us, because we are working purely with CSS, right? We don't want to use JavaScript. We want to see how we can achieve this and nav toggle on mobile screen with purely CSS without having to use JavaScript. So the first thing we are going to do, the next thing we are going to do, sorry to say, because we are going to be using general sibling selector, right? So we want to be able to see when something is selected, something should happen to the brothers or sisters, like siblings. Siblings are usually, like I always use that brothers and sisters to explain siblings, right? So we want to say that when a particular brother or sister is selected, we want something to happen to another brother or sister. So because they are sibling, we are going to be using general sibling selector. And so that means we are going to position them in, we are going to put them in our semantic in a way that they are actually brothers to each other, in order for brothers or sisters to each other, in order for us to be able to use brothers or sisters selector to select them, right? Or to tell what's going to happen to them when certain things happen. So what we will need here is an input of type checkbox, right? So this is our input type checkbox you see there. Then another thing we are going to do need is our nav, our menu bar, right? I want us to create a menu bar from scratch. Although we can actually just go to Font Awesome and get a menu bar from there, and also get a close button, so that at a particular time when something is checked, something is closed or something is hidden or displayed, and when another is clicked or checked, something is hidden or displayed, right? But we want to build everything from the scratch, because it allows us to be able to animate them easily in case we want to add any form of animation. So we are going to call this menu, right? Let me just call it a complete name of menu bar, so that I will understand that it's actually our menu bar. So I want a situation whereby when I check my input, something happens to my menu bars, right? Something happens to my menu bar, and something can also happen to my UL when I check this. So that's all we are going to need. So now we'll go to CSS and apply styles to this. So in our CSS, we want to first reset, like as usual, we want to add a padding of 0 and, sorry, margin of 0, and box sizing of what? Am I? Oh, sorry. Box sizing of border box, just like this, right? Having done that, we want to select our header and give it a height first. Sorry, want to give it a height. Sorry, don't mind my spellings. Want to give it a height of 5 rem. I like 5 rem a lot for my header. And I want to give it a background color of ash. Let's say, let's say 3CEA 8F, right? And we have something like this for our header. Why is it not showing yet? Okay, it's I think my my live server is lagging. Okay, so we have this already. So the next thing we need to do is to display, right, our header. We want to display it flex, so everything goes side by side, and we want to justify content space between, right? So we have this, we say go side by side like this, and we want to give this a, what, we want to give our header a padding, so that this time around we're using padding inline, which is left and right. We want to give it 2 rem, just like this. Okay, so now we want to move, sorry, we want to also come here and select our body, because I don't like the font I'm seeing, and I want to give it a font family of let's see, Helvetica Rare. Okay, all right, now we have that. So the next thing we are going to move to is our logo is okay. Okay, we should also align items to the center, right, so that they all are the center like this. All right, so the next thing we'll do is move to our nav, right? Do we really need to style our nav? It's just a container containing all this. So first of all, let's leave our nav and go to, okay, there's another thing we will do to header, because we are going to need to position our input and our what, our nav bars, we are going to position them absolute. But if you are positioning something absolute, it has to be positioned absolute in relation to something. So if you do not position, okay, sorry, let me talk about positioning. Positioning is a way of manipulating where particular elements are to be displayed in your web app, right? So positioning allow you to specify where a particular element should be in your web page. So if you position, there are different ways of positioning something. You can position sticky, you can position static, you can position absolute, and you can position relative. Now, if you position something by default, everything is positioned static. Static is the default way. Then you can position something sticky and give and specify where it should be sticky to, right? So when you have something that is scrolling, when you scroll to that particular um position, you have stated that it should be static. When immediately it gets there, it becomes static like fist there, and it does not exceed that there. Then you can also position something absolute. When you position it absolute, you now have right to take it, to move it anywhere you want to move it in that in your web app, right? So for instance, if I position something absolute, I'll be able to say it should be 2 rem far from left. I will be able to say it should be 20 rem far from the bottom, right? So the distance between bottom and it should be 20 rem. I can also say it should be 4 rem far from top. So the distance between it and top, I want it to be 5 rem, right? So that's what it means. But once I'm positioning something absolute, it has to be relative to to the nearest parent, right? And if there is no nearest parent that is position relative, that means it's going to be positioned in relation to the body, right? Which is very the first root element that is going to get, right? So for the purpose of this class, because we are going to be positioning items, some items that are inside the header, so we need to state that the header should be relative, so that when we position those items absolute, they will be positioned absolute in relation to the header, right? So I will say position relative, sorry, right? So you really will not see any difference for now. So what I will come here and do is I will now position okay, let me leave positioning first and just go to my navigation first, which is what? The UL, right? I want to display the UL flex in case because I don't want to run into problem when I have other UL later in the page. So I want to specify that this is I'm selecting the UL that is inside nav. So nav UL, I want it to display, sorry, flex, just like this, right? And everything will be in line, right? I want it to have a gap, right? A gap of say 2 rem, and the space from each other. That's okay. So the next thing I will do is I want to remove the bullet points and the underline. That's the anchor tag, which is the very test node is having. So what I will do is nav ulli, and I want to give it a list style. I don't even need that here. I can also apply that here and it will still work. So let's say list style none, right? Because it's inheritable. It's going to inherit that from the parent. So I don't need that in my li. So what I will just come here to do is to select my anchor tag, because it's the one holding the text, and I want to give it a text decoration because I want to remove the underline. By default is having anchor tag is by default having a text decoration of underline, right? Which I said you can also change to line through. If I change it to line through, for instance, you will see it's going to change to line through. But I want to remove it completely, so I will say none, right? And that disappears. Also, I want to change the color. So the text color, I will use the color property and give it, let's say 123, which is black, somehow black. Let me just change it to, sorry, 111, which will be darker. So we have our what's it called? Our desktop or laptop view set, right? So what I can also do is to say that I want to apply some styles to the UL when to the anchor tag when the UL is hovered. So I will use the hover. We probably didn't talk about this when we were talking because these are addition. These are things that makes your web page looks better, but we were talking about fundamentals, so that was why I didn't actually delve into this. So hover is when your cursor is on particular element, you want something to happen to that element. That's what hover is, to show that, maybe probably to show that your cursor is currently on that element, right? So we want to say when li is hovered, we want a to have a color of we want it to have a color of white, right? One, two, three. Sorry, color one, two, three, right? Now if you hover on li, you see that the color changes, but the color is changing very snappy, right? So what we can do is to add some transition so that it doesn't work so sharp, right? So we can come to the top and give that particular li a transition, right? Transition of say 0.5. We are trying to animate it a little. Now you see, I think it has not affected. Okay. Are we, oh, sorry, not transition actually is the A. Now you see that it's transitioning. It's no longer as sharp as it used to be, but I think it's too slow. So because the time is too big, so I want to reduce it to 3, and now it's, I think it's a bit okay, or I can just leave it at 2, right? 2 seconds, 0.2 seconds is better. All right. So when you hover on it, you know that you have hovered on it. So the next thing we are going to do is to make sure that our input is actually not showing, right? Our input is not supposed to show like it's showing here. So we want to go to our nav because our input is inside the nav, right? Yeah, it's inside the nav. So we want to say nav input, and we want to give it a width and height first. We want to give it a width of say 3 rem. I think that will be big, and also a height of 3 rem. Too big. So let's change it to 2. Sorry. When is 2? I think this is far better. Okay. So it's better like this. We have this, and it's okay like this. So what we want to do now is to now come and style our nav bar, create our nav bar. So here we want to create our nav bar, right? Nav bar is created. Here below we have this, right? Because we want to create our nav bar below. So what we will do now is we want to select this particular element, which is our nav bar, which is menu bar, right? So we'll select menu. Let me just do it like this and say nav dot menu bar, right? And we want to give it a width, right, of say 4 rem, because this one is 2 rem, right? 2 rem. And then we want to also give it a height, but the height should be very slim, of 2px, right? And I want to also say that it should have a background color of black, right? Background color of 000, right? You see that under the input is already there. But because your menu bars are usually 3, How do we do that? We only have one element here, but we want it to be three. We want to create three. So what we can do here is to use pseudo elements, right? Um, we are going to use pseudo elements to create that, and I want to use before and after, right? The after, right? So we want to say it should have the same width. No, sorry, this is pseudo element. Let's first of all give it a content of empty string and give it a width of 2 rem and a height of 2px and a display of block, right? And now is there. So we have this already. So what we, oh sorry, we didn't give it a background color. Now let's give it a background color of 000. You see that it becomes thicker. So that's to tell you that they are there. So what we can do now is to now select our before first. Nav dot menu bar before, and we want it to go up. We want to give it a, or better still, okay, we want to translate, we want to use the transform property, and we want to translate y because we are looking at vertical axis. We want to give it a translate y of, let's say, minus 1 rem. You see that it has moved up, but I think that's too big. But we are going to look at that later. We want to take the after as well, after, and give it a transform translate y of plus 1 rem, 1 rem. Now they are all separated, so but our 1 rem is too big, so let's change it to 0.5, and this one should also be minus 0.5 rem, just like this. But I think this is also, the height is too tiny, so let's change it to 3 pixels and see, is it thicker? I think it's thicker. So the menu bar should also have a height of 3px and it's a bit thicker. So we have our menu and we also have our menu bar. So what we can do now is to position both of them absolute, right? So we want to take our input and our menu bar. So what I will do is to say nav, sorry, input, comma, and dot, oh sorry, nav dot menu bar, and I want to position it absolute. Good. And I want, because I've positioned it absolute, I now have right to take them to different places as I wish. So what I will do is to say I want them to have a left of, oh sorry, it's going to right hand side. So I want to say right of 0. Let's see, to take them to the extreme end, but I want it to start from 2 rem. So we will say 2 rem, and it's going to start from where the order starts from. Now, because I have positioned this to absolute, I also want them to be at the center. From top to bottom, they should be at the center of the header. So now that is absolute, what I will do is to give them a top of 0 of, sorry, 50%. I'm telling it to come down 50%. Then I will go again and give it a transform y, transform translates y of minus 50%. And now they will be at the center perfectly, right? So our menu bar has to be properly manipulated for it to have equal spacing from each other. Now let's see what's going on there. Our before is having -5 frame, and this one is having +5 frame, right? Why are we having more space here than up? Why? Let's see if we can see display flex and flex direction of column and of gap of what, 0.5 rem, so that we can take this two off and see how it's going to work. Let's see what's going to happen. That did not work, right? This didn't work. Okay, so that means something is wrong, even though I don't have enough time to look at it, right? So we are translating before y to be minus zero point 0.5 rem, and it goes that way. Okay, this also, sorry, okay. So we want, what's happening? We have a bug actually. I'm trying to factor where to fix that. This gap, the gap between the after is too much. After and before, minus, go outside, right? Okay, let's manipulate this to 3 then, and it's going to now be equal. That means we short 2. Okay, let's see how that's work out in the future. So now the we have designed for desktop view. Now let's go and look at our mobile view, and we are going to use our media query for this. Sorry, our media, and we're going to see max width of 768 px, then at max is width of 708 pixel. By the way, we don't want this input to display in this place. We want display to be none right there. So input will disappear. And we also want menu bar to display none on big screen, right? Because we actually designed for big screen. And in smaller screen, we want them to display block. So we want nav input, sorry, to display block. Oh, I think I know why that did not work the other time, but sorry. So a smaller screen input will display. Now let's see how that is playing. Let's check that, right? At screen less than 768, you see that it's going to display, right? You see that here is here. At 768 is going to display. But if the screen is bigger, it's not going to display. Okay, we still have it too small. So now it's going to go off, and once it's less than 768, it's going to display. Okay, so we have that sorted. We have that sorted. Okay, now we also want our what's it called, our this, right? Nav.menu bar to also display here. Display block 2. So so it's going to display now. So when you have bigger screen, oh, okay, will not be able to effect that now. So on smaller screen, that's going to happen. Then on this, now let's work with when the input is checked, what's going to happen. We want to first of all come here and give our menu bar some animation, right? Before and after. Let's give this transition of 0.3 seconds, and do same for the pseudo elements, right? So when we come here and say when input is checked, we want something to happen, right? So let me say nav, when nav input is checked, right? Is checkable, right? When the nav input is checked, right? I want something to happen to the nav bar abstract. So I want to use the general sibling selector, because if you look at it, I say when this input, this particular input is checked, I want to select what happens to a sibling, which is this particular container, the menu bar container. So I want to select dot menu bar before, like this. So, and I want to specify what happens to it, and I say you should transform rotate, right, 45 degrees. So when input is checked, you see that it's actually working. So when input is checked, you see that working. Then I want to also do same to copy to after. This time around, this is going to be after, and I want after to be minus 45 degrees. So now you're going to see that. Then what happens to the center, what's it called? The very parent element. Let's see how we can select that. Sorry, sorry. I want to take. So, as I was saying, sorry for the interruption. What we can do now is, you see what is happening, but we don't need the main menu to display when the pseudo element are crossing each other, right? So that is going to form the close button. So what we can do is to come here and get the what's it called, the main menu, which is this. And what we can do here is to give it a background, change the background, because if we say it should have an opacity of 0, for instance, all the pseudo elements are going to inherit that. You see that? Checked. What's happening? Okay. You see that they are inheriting it because they are actually going to inherit, they're actually supposed to inherit that. So we are not going to give it an opacity of 0. We are going to use RGBA, which allows us to specify background and also opacity. So when we say RGBA, right? Sorry, background color, and say RGBA, right? If we enter this, you are going to see that R is for red, green is for, G is for green, blue is for, then A is for alpha, which tells the degree of opacity, right? So what I can just do is to give it 0 reds, 0 green, 0 blue, and also 0 alpha. So that means it should not display, right? It should be there, but it should have an opacity of 0 once the button is checked. Now, if we check the button, you see that it's gone, right? But our cross is not properly aligned. So let's see, where do we have that issue? Translate, rotate, right? Let's know the one that is after and the one that is before. Let's give after a background color of red. All right, red is having background color. Red is crossing like this. So if red comes down, red needs to come down. So okay, let me just add them using a shorthand. So I've given it rotate. I want to also give it a translate of y, because I want it to come down a little, say 2px and c, right? But does it make sense? And okay, let me use the shorthand for translate. The first one is the first value. If I use just translate without stating whether it should be vertical or horizontal, the first one is horizontal and the second one is vertical. So now that I put just 2pc, I'm saying both horizontal and vertical should be 2px, right? So I'm going to do same to this one and say translate as well. And I will say, let's say minus 2px and see. No, let's take off that minus. I think it's better like this. It's crossing properly now. All right. So now what we can do is to give our input. This our input. We want to take it to the front, right? We want to give it a z index. I want it to be on top of everything because that's what we're actually working with. That's why you see that when I click here, it's not, unless I find a way to click and a space. You see it's working here. But if I click here, it's not working because I'm actually on the pseudo elements. So because the input is at the back, so I want to find a way to bring it to the front. I'll give it a z index of 1, right? Now the input comes to the front and every other thing is not showing. So what I can do to make every other thing show is to give the input an opacity of 0. While it's still there, it's not going to be showing. So I'll give it an opacity of 0. Now, when I give it an opacity of 0, it's no longer there. It's no longer showing, but it's still there and it's still at the forefront, right? So when I click, I'm actually clicking on the input, not the elements, not the menu bars. You see that I can now click anywhere and it will still work around there because what I'm actually clicking on is the input, just that it's not showing, right? So what I can also do is I want to add a cursor of pointer so that it can actually point when it gets there, right? And I also think this our menu. Okay, now we are done with our menu, and also when we extend, our menu is going to disappear, right? When we get to 768 and when we are closer, it shows back. Another thing we want to add is this particular UL that is displaying. You see that by this at this point it's not supposed to display. So what we are going to do to that is to also come here and say when and see at this particular point we want our UL. Where is it? Okay, this we want to copy this and bring it here. We want our UL at this particular point to display flex and flex direction. Okay, it's already displayed flex. Let me take that off and just say flex direction should be colon, right? Yeah, and it's now colon, and also is at the top, right? So what I also want to do is to say our nav itself at this point, um, our nav should also be, do we have any style for nav up here? No, no. Okay, we want our UL at this point. Let's leave now first. Want it to position um absolute as well. If it's positioning absolute, it's going to be relative to the header, right? Because the nearest relative position element is the header. Because it's position absolute, we want to give it a left, sorry, a right of 0 so that it starts from the extreme end. And now we want to give it a background because it's now on a mobile view. We want to give it a background color of, say, what do we give it? Let's give it ash 33, right? Now it's having this, and we want to give it a width of, say, 20 rem, too much 10. Okay, perfect. And we want to give it a gap, right? We want to increase the gap to, oh, sorry, not gap. The gap remains the same, so let me take it off. Not to make my code bulky, take this off as well. So I want to give it what I want to give it. I want the content to be at the center, right? So since it's column, I'm going to align items to center like this, right? And I'm going to give it a padding, all round padding. I want the top to be bigger. I want to give the top 2 rem, and I want to give the side 1 rem, just like this. Okay, perfect. And this time around, I want it to have a color of white, right? FFF. It's not inheriting that because the anchor tag is actually having a color that is superior to this one. So that's not going to work. So let's take that off first. So what we can do now is to say that when input is checked, right? When our input is checked, at this particular point, we want this to not display. We want to give it a display of none. Display of none. So we want to say now when input is checked, right? When input is checked, we want to get UL, right? We want it to do what? To display flex when input is checked. So when input is checked, it's displaying, and when it's unchecked, it goes off. So let's properly position this. I want it to be just below my header, right? I want my navigation to be just below my header. So I'm going to give my UL, I mean. So I'm going to give it a top of, I want to add to the top of, say, 2 rem, just like this. Oh, sorry, 5 rem. Yeah, perfect. So that I can have it working like this, right? So now in here, I want to come here and say at this point, I want my LIA to have a color because the background is dark. Sorry, I want the color to be light of FFF, right? And when it's hovered, I want it to change to when li sorry z copy when li is hover, I want a to have a color of, say, I want it to be darker, let's say 555. So when, oh, 555 is too dark, let's change it to 777, right? So yeah, you have this. So the most important thing is your navigation bar. Sorry, it's your menu when you see how it's working. So I can now go back, and you see that when you extend it, it disappear and this shows, and when you close it works perfectly, right? So what I can do now is to go back to my I actually gave it a red, so I'm going to take this off. It's no longer useful, and everything is now working like this. So that's just all about making your nav or your header responsive with just CSS and no JavaScript. Thank you for being a part of today's section. I'll see you again in another section.